Hare Krishna. Today we're going to talk about principles and details in the context of Hṛdayānanda Mahārāja's response video to Śivarāma Mahārāja's video on Vaiṣṇavī Dīkṣā Gurus. So at the 11:31 mark in Mahārāja's video, he says, so did Prabhupada say that if I did not specifically establish something, you should not establish it? Did Prabhupada say that? Now, he said it in one sense, and we have to go back to Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion, Chapter 6, where he, Rupa Goswami, and we're supposed to be Rupanugas, and Prabhupada, in his translation and commentary, they established that there are basic principles which are invariable. You cannot change them. And there are details. So now, what you should change, you must change in order to stay relevant. As far as I know, Rupa Goswami does not mention as a fundamental rule of Bhakti Yoga that women should not be gurus. And it's hard to see how that would be a basic principle. Basic principles are like chant Hare Krishna, accept a bona fide guru, but making these gender distinctions is just not there. Rupa Goswami doesn't really talk about that as a fundamental principle of Bhakti Yoga. So it is not a fundamental, invariable, unchangeable principle, unquote. So first point here is that there are different inviolable, unchangeable, fundamental principles for different persons at different levels of spiritual advancement. So in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, text 9, Krishna says, Atha chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mayi stiram. Abhyasa yogina tato mam ichaptum dhananjaya. So here, the previous verse that Krishna is referring to, he says, Mayeva mana āratsva, mayi buddhim niveshaya. He says, just fix your mind upon me. Just fix your intelligence upon me, and you will always live within me. But in this shloka, Krishna is saying that if you cannot do that, if you cannot fix your mind upon me, then practice the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga, and in this way develop a desire to attain me. So I just want to read the purport. Srila Prabhupada, at the beginning of his purport, he says, quote, in this verse, two different processes of Bhakti Yoga are indicated. The first applies to one who has actually developed an attachment for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by transcendental love. And the other is for one who has not developed an attachment for the Supreme Person by transcendental love. For this second class, there are different prescribed rules and regulations one can follow to be ultimately elevated to the stage of attachment to Krishna. So let's talk about some of these fundamental, invariable, unchangeable principles that Hṛdayānanda Mahārāja is talking about. So one thing he says, but making these gender distinctions is just not there. And he's talking about this chapter 6 in the Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion, that is, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Well, guess what else isn't there? We don't find no gambling. We don't find no, where's the no illicit sex? Where's the no, where's the no intoxicants? Especially that, intoxicants. We see that actually very highly advanced devotees actually took intoxicants. Vamshidas Babaji, he used to smoke hashish. Srila Prabhupada, he even had a snuff box and so forth like that. So snuff, that's a tobacco-based product, if I'm not mistaken. So, so for those people who are on a higher level, well, they have different rules and regulations. They may or may not follow. Things that we have to follow, they don't necessarily have to follow, and so forth like that. So we don't also find the no intoxicants in this. At least, or maybe I missed something, but I don't think it's there in this list. I haven't seen it. I don't remember it. No intoxication, no intoxicants. So one unwarranted assumption on Hṛdayānanda Mahārāja's part is just because it's not in this list doesn't mean there isn't a rule somewhere that doesn't also apply. You might say it's like the fine print in a contract. So you have the contract, you have the big terms and everything, and then you have these little numbers there, and then you go down and you look at the fine print and say, well, oh my God, you know, it's like I'm also on the hook for that. So it's just a practical thing. You can't put everything in the same text. There are just some things that are understood, or if you want more information, you have to go to this other shastra, or you have to consult this other, you know, set of rules and regulations that really do apply, and they're actually necessary. But they're just not going to mention them here. So, so now so now going on, the question arises is that just because it's not mentioned here doesn't mean there isn't a rule that actually applies. So he continues on. So it is not a fundamental, invariable, unchangeable principle. In other words, you find gender distinctions. That's what he says. Well, if someone claims it is, then they would have to find not some little detailed verse in an obscure sutra or one of those very minor texts, which are somehow, in an informal or loose sense, a part of the Vedic corpus. So this is a very oblique reference to the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā. The Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā is one of a corpus of texts that are known as Narada Pancharatra. So the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā itself, this was narrated by Bhāradvāja Muni. At the very end of this, the Shastra, he says that I heard this from my guru Narada Muni, which is why it's considered part of Narada Pancharatra. And yeah, you can say in one sense it's obscure because we didn't talk about it, but Prabhupada at least mentioned it once in his Srimad Bhagavatam commentary. In Canto 4, Chapter 31, Text 10, Srila Prabhupada takes by name the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā as a Pancharatrika text that accepts persons as brahmanas by quality, not simply by birth. So Prabhupada says that explicitly there. So Gopal Bhatta Goswami, he also refers to it by name as a praman in his Satkriya Saradipika, and Baladevi Vibhushana also accepts it. So in his commentary, in his Bhagavatam commentary to Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 15, Baladevi Vibhushana, in explaining why Vidura could be the guru to Dhritarashtra despite being younger and despite also being a Shudra by birth, as compared with Dhritarashtra, who is a Kshatriya by birth, Baladevi Vibhushana explains that because he was actually he was Dharmaraj himself, but in the role of Shudra, but actually he was actually above such considerations. And Prabhupada in his own purport to the same shloka also explains this, that he was actually beyond considerations of gender or varna or ashram and so forth like that. So I'm going to read what Baladevi Vibhushana says. He says in his purport, he says, Shudro pi sakshad dharma rajatvena pratyakshīkrita parishat tasyata upadeshtrutvam iti. And so, though Vidura was younger, and though he was a Shudra by birth, because he was Dharmaraj himself, he had directly realized the Supreme Lord. That's pratyakshīkrita parishat. He directly realized the Lord. And therefore he instructed Vidura. And he continues on. He says, Ata eva Bhāradvāja-saṁhitājām stri shudrarinām tan nishidya sakshat krita paratattvanām tisham tad aha. So So Baladevi Vibhushana, then he takes the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā by name as Praman. He says, it is for this reason that the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā forbids women, Shudras, and the like from becoming Guru, and allows women, Shudras, and the like who have directly realized the supreme truth. And this is directly referring to the diksa-guru because the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā verses itself are na jatu mantrada nari, and so forth like that. So we're talking about diksa-guru here specifically, or mantra-guru, mantra-datta guru. So the question is this, can we discount this because it is, from our point of view, obscure? Well, let me ask this question here. Let's take this shastra called Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita. Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita is a smriti text written by Srila Narahari Sarkar. So he was also an associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this shastra is important in ISKCON because the GBC in their 1998 book, actually I think it's before 1998, but the version I have is 1998. So in their book, Gurus and Initiations in ISKCON, this shastra is consulted. And why is it consulted? Is because at the time there are so many gurus who are falling down, and so some guidance was needed for devotees on how to deal with gurus, with fallen gurus. And this is very important because in Prabhupada's time, we didn't have the problem of gurus falling down. That just didn't happen in his time. So he didn't deal with that. But in this time, we had to deal with it. And because Prabhupada didn't say much about it at all, it was right for them to go and see what the previous acharyas had said. So in any case, those different shlokas from this shastra were translated. And guess who translated those shlokas? That was Hṛdayānanda Mahārāja. So it says here in the book, in Appendix 3, the portion of Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita quoted in this paper is transliterated here, with word-for-word meanings given by Sripad Hṛdayānanda Das Goswami. So again, how many times did Srila Prabhupada mention Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita? 0 times. 0. He did not mention it at all in any of his books, lectures, letters, or conversations. He did not take the name. How many times did Srila Prabhupada take the name of Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā? Once. Once that we know of. And that's in his Srimad Bhagavatam commentary specifically. So, in that sense, this Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita is even more obscure than Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā. But yet that was accepted. So actually, obscurity is really irrelevant. Whether the text is obscurity, it's whether that text has been accepted by our acharyas or is approved by has been accepted by acharyas. That's one special criterion. And here we see that Baladevi Vibhushana himself has accepted Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā. And specifically, the portion of Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā that deals with the question of the eligibility of women on the topic of whether they can be diksa-guru or not. So, and he says there, and it says in that shastra, what is the criterion? What is the qualification for them? So to see how this, to understand how this works, well, let's go back to 1968. A letter, April 26, Prabhupada wrote to Janardana. April 26, 1968, he said that the one who is liberated Gunacharya cannot commit any mistake. But there are those who are less qualified or not liberated, but who can become Guru and Acharya by strictly following the disciplic succession. So again, we see that there are two sets of criteria, two sets of rules for persons at different levels of spiritual advancement. And for those on the lesser level, on the lower level, they have certain rules to follow. So therefore, when Prabhupada said in Bhagavatam commentary regarding Suniti, that Bhagavatam 4:12-32, he says Suniti, being a woman, and specifically his mother, could not become Dhruva Mahārāja's diksa-guru because she was a woman. So because she was a woman, specifically his mother, she could not become Dhruva Mahārāja's diksa-guru. So the reason that Prabhupada says that is because there is a shastric reference to it. That's all. And that shastric reference clarifies that yes, it's definitely mother. It's not definitely mother, but definitely because she was a woman, that she could not become the Shiksha-guru. So it's not appropriate, it's not proper for her, not appropriate for her to become the guru at her particular level. Now, if she's at a much more advanced level, if she was like a Gangamata Goswamini or somebody like that, or a Janava Devi, then yes, and she's at a different level. But we're talking about Suniti. And we see in the Prabhupada's purport to the next shloka, Prabhupada says that Suniti, going back to Godhead in a different airplane with Dhruva because he thought of her, Prabhupada says that this incident proves that the Shiksha or Diksha-guru, who has a disciple who executes devotional service as strongly as Guru Maharaj, can be carried by the disciple even though he is not as advanced. So definitely we're talking Suniti is the model guru. Actually, she's a model guru for the rest of ISKCON, because the vast majority of gurus, we can say practically everybody in ISKCON who's going to become a guru is going to be on this lower level, so less qualified or not liberated. So Suniti is actually our model, not Janava Devi, not Gangamata, but Suniti particularly is our model. So we have to, the point is that we have to follow the rules and regulations of the shastras and the acharyas given us, because especially because the shastric rules are free from the four defects of conditioned human life. And only when we follow them can we be assured that we're on the right path. So regarding the Bhāradvāja-saṁhitā and its validity as a praman, as a shastra to decide the issue, we've seen that Hṛdayānanda Mahārāja does not accept it, but Baladevi Vibhūṣana does. So ask yourself this. This is my one humble request. Ask yourself this. Who do you trust more? Whose opinion do you trust more? Hṛdayānanda Mahārāja or Baladevi Vibhūṣana? Hare Krishna.